Welcome back to Questions for the Rector Live. I'm your host, Stephen Heiner, and with us for all questions for the Rector is the Rector of Most Holy Trinity Seminary in Reading, Pennsylvania, His Excellency Bishop Donald Sanborn. Hello, Your Excellency.
Hello, Stephen.
You're strapped in for another 2-hour session of people asking you questions nonstop, and someone says it's 1 a.m. in Moscow, and he's ready for the stream.
I hope he's safe. That's all.
We'll start here. JDH659 for $20. Thank you, JDH. Hello, Your Excellency. I was received and confirmed in a Novus Ordo parish in 2011 in the Diocese of Pensacola, Tallahassee. Was this a valid confirmation? Are any of the sacraments I have received valid?
I would say it was not valid for the reason that they changed the rite of consecration of bishops in 1968. And there are virtually no bishops that are validly consecrated. And the change was such that they changed the form, and the form contained a serious error, if not heresy, concerning the nature of the episcopacy. And whenever you do that, you invalidate. That's a general principle. So I would say no, he is not validly confirmed.
And then following on, are any of the sacraments I've received valid? If you're attending a mass, then an invalid mass, that would mean no Holy Eucharist, no valid priesthood.
All filters down into the priests that they have ordained. And that's 1968. That's what, 56 years ago? Is that right? Close to it. So, I mean, that's a long time. That's over half a century. So that means virtually all of the Novus Ordo priests are invalidly ordained.
And I suppose the key question, obviously, on which all the other sacraments depend, Your Excellency, is baptism. So the person would need to investigate that.
Yes. Now, baptism, it can be done very easily, even by a layperson. It's valid, but the Novus Ordo, again, has fooled around with that. And they are careless with the way they do it, even though their ritual book has it done correctly. In other words, instructs you to do it correctly. Nonetheless, they are careless. And this is exactly what happened to Protestants. They have valid books, but nobody knows what they're doing because they don't really believe in matter and form and the efficacy of the sacrament or the validity of the sacrament, depending on matter and form. For them, it's a ceremony. See, it's a ceremony of introduction into the church. See, so that's the problem. Also, their intention might be questionable too.
So, I was talking about this with my mother the other day, Your Excellency, and I was very surprised to find out I didn't know this before. She said at my baptism in 1979, the Jesuit priest used the old form. She said that she recognized that when her grandchildren, my nieces and nephews, were baptized in the traditional rite as being very different from my other sisters who were baptized in the Novus Ordo. So even as late as 1979, some conservative clergy were still using the old form, which was surprising to me. I didn't know that.
Well, I don't know what she means by the old form. They did not change the form.
What I mean is all the old ceremonies with the anointing, the salt and exorcism. So it's surprising to hear that. Yes. There is a specific question here. I already know what His Excellency is going to say. JDH659 for $10. Thank you, JDH. I married a woman who was married twice before she and I were married. Was this a valid marriage? We are now divorced. Can I trust the tribunals of the Novus Ordo if I seek a declaration of nullity?
Well, the answer to the last question is no. All right. The first question, we would have to know a lot more. You see, I just couldn't answer that without knowing all the details of all the marriages involved.
So JDH, as we always say in these cases, particular private marriage cases, you have to discuss this with the clergy. So if you use the contact us form on mhtseminary.org and send that in, a priest will look at it, potentially even His Excellency, and they will be able to answer your question more clearly. Mm-hmm. For those who are coming into the stream now, if you haven't already done so, please remember to hit the like button and let us know where you're watching or listening from today. William Schaefer, 5372, $20. Thank you, William. What does His Excellency think about membership in lay organizations such as the Legion of Mary or the St. Vincent de Paul Society?
Both of those are dependent upon and part of, you might say, the Novus Ordo. So I would say you should quit those. The Novus Ordo has to be completely rejected. It is an invasion by the enemies of the Catholic Church into our holy religion. You have to completely cut yourself off from the Novus Ordo.
And if he means in ordinary times, Your Excellency, would these be good groups to be a part of? Let's say when you were growing up?
Yes, certainly. But they are branches of the Novus Ordo.
Knights of Columbus, same thing.
Same thing, yes.
Krokoslav, that looks like, does Czechia have its own currency that's different from?
Yes.
Okay, so it's 200 of whatever that currency is.
Mm-hmm.
Your Excellency, have the ancient Catholic churches, Coptic, Syriac, Maronite, Chaldean, and others, which have been in communion with Rome for centuries, preserved the Catholic faith and liturgy after Vatican II?
I don't know for certain, but I have heard that they have bought into Vatican II and its changes. But I don't know exactly what happened in their liturgy, but theologically they have accepted Vatican II and its changes. That's what I have heard on good authority.
Nicole E, 12388, $20. Thank you, Nicole. A little more nerdy, Your Excellency. In relation to the properties of bodies as understood by cosmology, composition, changeability, contingency, limitation, what is the status of our Lord's body in heaven and our risen bodies after the general resurrection?
Well, we don't know what the status is of our Lord's body in heaven. We don't know. That was never revealed. So certainly he is in heaven with a human body, and that's his human body that he took from the Blessed Virgin Mary. And we are not sure about the state of our bodies after the general resurrection, except that they will be glorified bodies that we know, but where they will be, in other words, where heaven is, it has to be a place if there's a body. We don't know. There's much we don't not know.
All right. Flatus interrogatus, 12 Australian dollars. Thank you, Flatus. What are your favorite Protestant hymns or songs, like "O Holy Night"? I didn't think there'd be a long list of your favorite Protestant hymns, Your Excellency.
Well, "O Holy Night" is a Protestant hymn. That hymn was written by a Protestant. But the Catholic Church adopted it. "Holy God, we praise thy name" is originally Protestant. And there are other nice tunes that the Protestants have, especially the Anglicans. Many "Away in the Manger" was written by Luther, but that was commonly not heard in Catholic churches. And then "Hark the Herald Angels Sing" was banned from Catholic churches. It was written by Handel, but it must have been from, I'm guessing, one of his operas, because the church always banned things and melodies that were lifted out of operas that it did not approve of, or any kind of secular source. So
was that rehabilitated, Your Excellency? Because I've heard it sung since "Hark the Herald Angels Sing."
Not before Vatican II. You haven't heard it.
Okay. Well, I wasn't around before Vatican II. Your
Excellency. It was a band. We never heard it.
Okay.
So, but it's a beautiful hymn. I mean, it's just, for example, the wedding march of Mendelssohn. Here comes the da 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 da. That's banned because it comes from a dirty opera, and the march coming in, "Here Comes the Bride," is also banned because it comes from a dirty opera of Wagner. See, so those things were banned in the Catholic Church, but in itself, it's not impossible that a Protestant hymn could migrate into the Catholic Church and vice versa.
A little easier question here from Brett Brandon for $2. What is your opinion of Bishop McGuire? Is he valid?
Yes, we very carefully observed on the not live stream, but the video of the consecration very, very carefully, and we determined that it was all done validly.
And I suppose people don't know, you probably have a little bit of knowledge of Bishop McGuire, given that you formed him as a priest.
Yes, but we used Hawkeyes to make sure that it was valid. It was done validly.
Following on here, Jaime EasyBN for $5, or Jamie as it might be. Your Excellency, does the Institute only confirm thesis adherence? or totalists as well?
Well, we do is this confirmation? We do confirmations in our own parishes or our own mass centers, you might say. And so the question doesn't come up. But a totalist, I would not hesitate to give sacraments to a totalist because he at least adheres to the essential, which is that this creature in Rome is not a true pope. That is essential. Now, we would disagree on how he is not the pope, but the essential is that he's not the pope. On the other hand, I would not give sacraments to someone who adheres to the idea that he is a true pope for obvious reasons.
Along those lines, we have a couple Institute questions in general, Your Excellency. Do the statutes of the Institute encourage priests to live a communal life together in houses similar to the SSPX? And if so, do they follow a rule of life such as shared meals, common prayer, etc.?
Yes, to all of the above. Yes, we might make some exceptions for, because, people are in circumstances where they need to be alone, in the sense only one priest is available. But that's very exceptional. As a matter of fact, we're making arrangements that even in those cases, that they spend a great deal of time with priests and only go to their missions where they would be alone occasionally.
A follow-up to that question is, do the faithful attending Institute chapels have to hold the sede privationist position?
No, we don't insist on that. No, we just preach about it. We explain it. The key is that you are not unicum. That for us is key. If you could be a totalist, and it's just another explanation of it. We think that it's wrong, but it's not against the faith. It's nothing disturbing about it in that sense. But we just think it's mistaken. That's all.
A follow-up on O Holy Night, Your Excellency, is from the French Minuit Chrétien. No?
Yes, Minuit Chrétien was written by a Protestant, and the French told me that. So, to my great surprise and sadness. It's a great hymn.
Louis, 1958, 10 Swiss francs. Thank you, Louis. Your Excellency, if you could witness one ecumenical council firsthand, which one would it have been? Greetings from Zurich.
Trent.
Why am I not surprised?
Glorious. It was glorious. Yes.
Was very. I have to point out, Your Excellency, you had been there 20 years, given all the numerous sessions and then times that they had to move around.
Yes.
But yes.
It would have been worth it. Yeah.
No doubt. LDP 4301 for $5. Thank you, Luke. How did missionaries like the North American martyrs deal with immodestly dressed natives?
Well, when they first went over, Father St. John de Brébeuf had to live with the natives who were scantily dressed. When he went to the Algonquins just north of Quebec, for example, the Indian chief, who was very friendly to him, offered him his wife and some other ladies as a sort of a welcome wagon, and he was horrified, of course. And then he lived among the Hurons, and he had to spend the winter in what they call a longhouse, a big long tent, essentially. And there would be free love among all of the inhabitants of the longhouse. And he had to endure that for a whole winter. But then later he built his own cabin and lived there, but he could not do that in the winter. So, but they in Canada, in Ontario, what is now Ontario, they built two sections of the fort of Sainte Marie, and they kept the pagans in one section and those who were converted in the section with themselves. And so they separated the Christians from the pagans. That's how they dealt with it. But they would encourage them as much as possible to put on some clothes. Just as the Franciscans in California, they didn't wear a single stitch of clothing. Not the Franciscans, but the Indians did not wear a single stitch of clothing. They had to. You have to deal with those things. Archbishop Lefebvre, he said we wouldn't baptize the ladies until they put on a top.
So very different from the JP2 method, Your Excellency, in which those people are invited to read the epistle.
Yes. 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 So yeah.
So Ronnie 6811 asks for $2. Thank you, Ronnie. Did the suppression of the Jesuits pave the way to the French Revolution? And if so, how?
Yes, it did, principally because they controlled education in France. That was 1774. So you had probably 15 years there, approximately, and in which they were not educating the youth. They were a bulwark against the spirit of the Enlightenment, the so-called Enlightenment. I call it obscurantism. Voltaire, Montesquieu, all of those hard people, they were a bulwark against that. And that's why those Masonic governments, don't forget Spain, Portugal, France, and Austria, all had Freemasons in the government as the ministers, the prime minister and all of the ministers of the kings were Freemasons. And they wanted the Jesuits out. And for that reason, they were a bulwark against all of that rotten thinking going on at that time.
Jaime for $2. Jaime, you asked the question below. If you did have another question, feel free to put that in the chat, and I'll do my best to find that and ask it. Again, if you haven't done so, remember to hit the like button and let people know where you are watching or listening from. Thank you for your work, Your Excellency. After listening to you for 5 months, I've decided to take the sedevacantist position. I find your videos very helpful, and I hope to make subtitles in Vietnamese. So I hope Your Excellency staff won't claim copyright if I re-upload the videos with subtitles. And
we wouldn't have the slightest idea what you were doing.
In any case, if you would like to do that, I think you hear His Excellency is happy for you to do that.
Yes, it's all
we wouldn't
copyright free.
We wouldn't be able to know if the Vietnamese was correct. So we'll hopefully take your good word that you are not mistranslating His Excellency.
Yes.
So Matthew Arthur for $2. Thank you, Matthew. It's got a 2-part question. In an earlier live stream, Bishop Sanborn jokingly said about his grandfather's thought towards Ireland today. Maybe I shouldn't think about what he would say. Was Bishop Sanborn's grandfather quite an earthy fellow? And was this on his mother's or father's side? I think you're alluding to the fact that he might use very rough language, Your Excellency, if you were to talk about Ireland today.
Oh, he would express himself quite well. He was. I never heard him use a bad word, though, except once. What he had to say about the person that shot Kennedy, and he used a vulgar word, and I won't say it, but I was shocked because we never heard bad language in the house, and but he was upset.
Was this this was your maternal
grandfather? He was born and raised in Belfast, and he's the one that saw the Titanic being built, and his wife said that they put "to hell with the Pope" on the hull of the Titanic. It was built in Belfast, and in 1912 he came over because those were the troubled times in Ireland when they were fighting the British. So anyway. I wouldn't say he was earthy, but he was down to earth. I would say that. Yes, he called a spade, and had no reticence about saying what he thought. Yes.
Well, I wonder where you got that from, Your Excellency. It doesn't seem to be.
Well, in the Irish side of my family, frankness was a virtue, and my father used to say about my grandfather, his name isn't Frank for no reason.
It's not Frank for nothing.
Yes. Now, so, my mother's sister, my aunt, would come to the door, and if my mother would perhaps have a new dress on, she would say right at the door, that makes you look fat. Just like crushing my mother before she even came into the house. That's that's the Irish side of my family. So I guess frankness from them.
Yes, it's definitely in the family, Your Excellency. So this is an extended question, and you had a chance to look at it before. So I'm going to pause at each stage of the question. Mm-hmm. I serve as an altar boy in an Institute of Christ the King parish, and for a while now, I felt drawn toward the priesthood. But following everything around the SSPX excommunications, I've gotten pretty confused. I know the Institute is connected to Bishop Sanborn, whose talks and podcasts I found compelling, but I'd like to hear your position directly from you. He emailed us. Mm-hmm. Why does the Institute hold that the chair of St. Peter is vacant? And how does this differ from the SSPX or the Institute of Christ the King?
Well, we say it's vacant formally. That means that the person who is elected, and we say he's validly elected, does not have the power from Christ to teach, rule, and sanctify the church, and therefore is not a true pope, because that's what makes you a pope, not the election in itself. It's the power from Christ. And the reason that he doesn't have the power is because he intends to impose a new religion on the institutions of the Catholic Church. So in order to dispel your confusion, you have to ask yourself this question: is Vatican II and the reforms that come after it, all both liturgical and doctrinal and disciplinary, is that the same thing as pre-Vatican II Catholicism? Or is it a rupture? Is it something different? That will answer all of your questions, because if it's the same, then we should not resist it. If it's the same faith, the same religion, we should not resist it. There's no reason to. If it is rupture, and we say it is, then we have to fight it as if it were Protestantism or Arianism or any other heresy that has invaded the church. And this one is much worse because it is from within. And St. Pius X said that in Pascendi. The problem is that this is something approaching the church from within in the ranks of the clergy. And they've gotten into control, these modernists, and they have changed the religion. They have altered the religion to be just a humanity religion. And you can see that from Leo. All he can talk about is making the world a better place in which to live. See, so that's how he has to answer that question. Is it continuity or rupture?
Well, and as you've said in other places, Your Excellency, if it is continuity, we should blow up some balloons.
Yes.
And get involved.
Yes, and clown suits. And in other words, we should embrace the whole thing as coming from God. And we should shut down the traditional movement. If it is rupture, we must fight and even give up our lives in order not to accept it.
All right. Next question in the multi-part question. What's your view on the recent excommunications within the SSPX?
Well, if you regard Leo as a true pope, then they're excommunicated. He warned them, if you do this, you have an automatic excommunication as canon law. You will be excommunicated and you will be considered schismatic. That's what he said to them. And the reason is that we can't make an accommodation to you is because you reject certain fundamental points of Vatican II. He said all of that. So if he is the Pope, then they are excommunicated and then they are also schismatic. We say, of course, that he's not a true Pope. So as far as we're concerned, they are not excommunicated and they are not schismatic, at least from that point of view. But they're still holding out for this idea that he's the Pope, but we can ignore him and thumb our nose at him, and we don't care what you say. We're not schismatic. We're not excommunicated, and as if they can appeal to something beyond him. He is the high court of the Catholic Church. There is nothing to appeal to beyond the Pope. If he says it's valid, it's valid. In other words, if the excommunication, he's the boss. So you can't do that with a Pope. You can't. And Archbishop Lefebvre tried the same thing. I remember he told me that he was started to say that all of the actions taken against the Society of St. Pius X back in 1976 were from the cardinals surrounding him, but it was not from Paul VI. And Paul VI wrote him a letter in his own hand, which popes never do. All right. And he showed it to me. And he said, look, I have a letter from Paul VI saying everything that was done was by my instruction. See, so it's back to the same old thing that the T's were not crossed and the I's were not dotted. And that's just nonsense. What they should do is give the true justification for what they have done, and that is attack Vatican II as the constitution of a new religion. Attack it and all of the rot that has come down from Vatican II and which is destroying the Catholic Church. That would justify what they have done, but they don't do that.
We're in the very strange position now, Your Excellency, that if If our position is correct, they are not excommunicated. But if their position is correct, they are.
Yes, yes.
Do you consider the sacraments at the Institute of Christ the King valid and safe, or should I reconsider where I go to Mass?
No, they are ordained in the new rite of ordination by bishops who are consecrated in the new rite of consecration. So new rite of ordination is dubious, but the rite of consecration is certainly invalid. So those, as far as we are concerned, they are not validly ordained. So yes,
this young man is serving Mass at an invalid Mass in all likelihood.
That's our position.
How many priests do you have, and where are you active?
People ask me how many priests we have. I don't know, which is terrible. I think
it's more than a dozen, Your Excellency.
Yes, more than a dozen, but I couldn't name them off the top of my head. What was this? Where are they stationed?
Where are they active?
Australia, United States, France, Poland, England. Is that it? I think so.
Spain, Spain, Portugal,
Réunion off Madagascar, also Vietnam, occasionally Japan,
Singapore as well.
Singapore too. So they get around. New Zealand, yes.
So a few places anyway, Your Excellency.
Here and there.
And for people who'd like to see His Excellency in that area, he will be in Australia at the end of December and early January. There'll be confirmations and some talks. He's still recuperating from his last round of confirmations and talks elsewhere. So now he's going to go to the other side, the Antipodes, to do the same.
I have confirmations in Detroit this weekend.
This is the job of a bishop.
Mm-hmm.
I know you have a seminary in the United States. How long is the formation? What does it cost? And do you take seminarians from Europe?
How long? It's 7 years of formation, 1 propedeutic year in which we teach Latin primarily, and then 2 years of philosophy, 4 years of theology. What was the next question?
How much does it cost?
$7,500 American per year. All right. And do we take? Yes, we have students from Europe. We have, yes.
Europe needs priests, Your Excellency. So I would say, in a certain sense, we really take seminarians from Europe.
Yes, we have the ability to take in seminarians from foreign countries. We have approval from the government to do that.
And the last question from this young man was: are there any books or talks you would recommend?
Oh, the book I would recommend that would straighten out your whole mind is the Anti-Christian Conspiracy, which we are soon publishing, and that would it's a long book, but it explains everything that's going on in these times. That would let's see, I'm trying to think of other.
There's the Bishop Sanborn Dr. Fastigi debate.
Yes, there's that. I mean, is
a lot of people like that
particular book. Well, there's Father Cicada's Work of Human Hands. That would be excellent. So I'm trying to think of off the top of my head another great book. Well, familiar is Pascendi, reading the encyclicals of especially the popes since maybe about the French Revolution, Pius VI, all the way through. Those encyclicals have a great deal of wonderful doctrine, and you will see how different it is from Vatican II. So that's a lot right there. But wait for the publication of this book. And yes. I don't know if it's this fellow, maybe he speaks French. He could probably get a conjuration anti-chrétienne in French. I don't know.
Oh, yes. It just depends on where he is. But I will just take a quick moment and put links to the 2 books that His Excellency recommended, Work of Human Hands and The Anti-Christian Conspiracy. You can find those yourself. This is from earlier, so it said, on a recent Questions for the Rector, His Excellency spoke of excommunication putting one, quote, outside the church. This was at the 8:30 timestamp. Is that correct? I can find nothing to corroborate that.
Well, it depends on the nature of the crime and the nature of the excommunication. The Vatican, and I'm talking about a hypothetically valid Vatican, can determine what the effect is. In other words, it could be that you are merely cut off from the the general benefits, the spiritual benefits of the church, or it means you could be cut off from the church, period. All right. Now, in this case, they said they're schismatic. So that means the force of the excommunication is that you're outside the church.
So that's that answer. And someone had asked a few months ago, Your Excellency, you read the responses of Archbishop Lefebvre to the excommunications of 1988. Is there a source where I can read what you read?
Oh, not off the top of my head. I would have to really look for it. I'd have to look for it. Probably on my computer.
Well, I can pull one, Your Excellency, because it's very easy. It's called 1 Year After the Consecrations, and it was an interview with the Archbishop at that time. And I put a link to it in the chat.
But his sermon at the consecrations was very, very good. Okay. And that should be searched.
See if I can find. So the sermon at the 1988 consecration, Your Excellency,
was an excellent sermon.
If I can, how fast the internet can help me, and I can link to that. 1988 Episcopal Consecrations sermon. That's also on the U.S. District's website, and I will put that in the chat.
Also, his 1974 declaration is very good.
All right, 1974. Is this the hot summer?
No, it was after after the visitors from the Vatican came.
Yes, and asked all sorts of inappropriate questions.
That your place stinks, essentially, and that was his reaction.
Yes, I can. We refuse, on the other hand, and have always refused to follow the Rome of neo-modernist and neo-Protestant tendencies, which were clearly evident in the Second Vatican Council and after the Council and all the reforms which issued from it. Okay.
In my opinion, that is the true Lefebvre. In his heart, he hated modernism and he hated everything that came out of Vatican II.
So I know the U.S. District may be surprised to see a bunch of web traffic to their website coming from you, Your Excellency, but there it is. Moving on, who was the last valid pope?
There's some controversy about that. The question is, who was the first one to plot the introduction of a new religion in the institutions of the church? That's the question. Was it John the 23rd or Paul the 6th? Everyone admits Paul the 6th, but there's some discussion about John the 23rd. I say most probably it was he that started it and that he was a false pope. But some people disagree. Okay.
Would you say that that's a minority position, Your Excellency? That
I never took a poll. It's just that the calling of the council and the the fact that he favored all of the leftists at the council. They always had doors open to them, and on the other hand, he was shutting down people who were against the reforms. I think that's very significant that he was part of this revolution, in my opinion.
Okay. Are you able to provide the reason why the Mass cannot be said in the vernacular? I would like to know the traditional Catholic arguments against such a practice.
Well, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with it. In other words, if all they did was to translate the Mass into vernacular, there would be no reason to have a traditional movement except to say, well, it would be better in Latin. So we're not, it's just that the problem is that modern languages change. That's one of the reasons. I'll give you an example. I have a book written around 1900 and talking about the consecration of the Mass. It says, now we come to the most awful part of the Mass. 1900. All right. Now that's not that long ago. And the, by 1950, I remember growing up, you would never say that's an awful part of the Mass. Never. Awful took on the idea of horrid and disgusting. You see, whereas in 1900, so in a period of 50 years only, it changed a great deal, almost to an opposite idea. See, so that's one of the problems, that modern languages change. Many words that were acceptable 100 years ago are unacceptable now. They have different meanings. And so dogmas have to remain always the same. And the liturgy is a vehicle of dogma. Secondly, it is the language of, not the language of the street. It is the living language of an unchanging church. It's an unchanging language of an unchanging church, so that it lifts you up. Also, it shows the unity of the church, that it's the language of Rome, which is the center of the church. And so in all of certainly the Western church, you have the traditional and Roman language. And it's true that other religions use their ancient languages. The Muslims use classical Arabic in their liturgy or services. The Greeks use classical Greek in their services, and those are not able to be understood by the people. Typically it's where the language is the same as the origin of the religion. See, that's a general principle. So those are and Pius VI said that the vernacular, changing the Mass into the vernacular, would lead to many bad effects.
So as you said originally, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with it being in the vernacular, especially Liturgy of St. John Chrysostom. Old Slavonic was the vernacular for some people a long time ago, but that has obviously fallen away.
He was in Greek.
Right.
But for example, now the apostles had the gift of tongues. So St. Peter could have said Mass either in Latin or in Greek. He didn't know either of those from his origins, So they spoke Latin in Rome, and they spoke Greek. The upper classes would speak Greek to each other in Rome. And there were some also Greek migrants, you might say, in Rome among lower classes. But there were, the common people spoke Latin. So he must have preached in Latin. He must have preached in Greek. So it's not to say that Latin was not, from the beginnings of Rome itself, So
I was just smiling because it was a different class of migrants to Rome back then, Your Excellency.
Yes, they were probably servants in the big rich houses and everything like that.
Greek speaking.
Yes.
I've heard from people that the traditional Latin Mass was not how the Mass was said during the time of the apostles. If so, where did it come from, and why is it necessary to have a Mass different from the apostles?
Well, first of all, we don't know how the apostles said Mass. We don't know. It's very fragmented knowledge about that, and most of the descriptions are from well after the apostles. But it is normal that the church, just like a tree, grow. In other words, that the liturgy, little by little, would take on, let's say, a greater beauty, be more explicit about the various doctrines, also might respond to heresies in the Mass. In other words, doctrines that were introduced. For example, there was no elevation of the host or chalice until there was an anti-Eucharistic heresy in the 11th or 12th century AD. So then that was the adoration. You'd raise the host. You see, that's against the heresy. See, so there was a legitimate development of the sacred liturgy that was slow and very careful and approved by the church. See, so it would be wrong to just say it had to be done in the same way as the apostles. I mean, it'd be like saying we have to go back to the Model T.
Well, I mean, the apostles didn't celebrate the Feast of Corpus Christi. The apostles didn't celebrate the Feast of Christ the King. So this idea that we have to go back to the
it's the property of the church. The liturgy, the sacred liturgy, is the property of the church, and it can develop it as it will, according to all of the demands of dogma, etc.
One of the young Germans that you met in Rome, Your Excellency, said this was going to be too late for him, so he sent in his donation ahead of time, so 15 euros. Thank you, Jonas. During the most recent priestly ordinations of the Institute of the Good Shepherd, Cardinal Müller apparently changed the forma essentialis of priestly ordination by mistake. He said the word manus instead of munus. Assuming Cardinal Müller is a validly consecrated bishop, would these priestly ordinations then be certainly valid, positively doubtful, or certainly invalid?
Well, I don't know if he's validly consecrated or not. I tend to think probably not, but we'll prescind from that question. Munus means function. Manus means hand. All right. So you have an entirely different meaning between function and hand. And that would certainly invalidate. Now, I listened to that twice very carefully, and he said manus. It was a mistake. And it is possible to make a mistake, but somebody should say, "You made a mistake, Your Excellency," and then, or Your Eminence in his case, and you go back and start again. It's not impossible that you get something wrong. You're nervous a little bit. It's not to. It's just you have. Why don't people say something? If you said something wrong, there's people all around him.
Well, that's assuming those people know any better either, Your Excellency. They might be playing dress up also.
I guess so. But I mean, that would be right away. You would stop the bishop and say, we have to do something else.
I think it's important to note this is why priests cannot only be taught how to pronounce Latin so that they can say masses, but they actually have to know Latin, Your Excellency. So a priest who know Latin, I don't think Muller uses Latin very much in his life, would know the difference between...
He's well educated. He knows Latin very well. I would not take that away from him. He just made a mistake.
Munus and manus. You say it's certainly invalid.
He made a mistake and he didn't realize it. And somebody should have said something.
So you're proceeding from the question of his own validity, but even if he was valid, this would certainly be invalid.
It's certainly invalid. Any kind of change of meaning, and that's certainly a change of meaning, invalidates.
All right. A reminder to hit the like button if you haven't done so already. There are another 150 viewers watching from when we first started. So if you haven't done so already, please hit the like button and let us know where you are watching or listening from. It helps the stream get out to more people. Your Excellency, I really appreciated your commentary on the encyclical Pascendi, and I thought you might be able to help me. This encyclical argues that a study of scholastic philosophy is the key to combating the errors of modernism. I've wondered to what degree I'm infected by modernism, and I'd like to do whatever I can to cure myself of it. But as a father of two with a busy work life, I can't devote what I expect would be a lot of time to truly master all of the works of Aristotle and St. Thomas, among others. What would be a course of study for a busy layperson that would safeguard them against modernism?
Good question. Well, there are some books on scholastic philosophy that you could read that are relatively simple, that are not too complex. Monsignor Glenn, Glenn. I don't know if he's available. It's very, very popular, and it's expensive because it's so popular. He was a Monsignor who taught at the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, in this where we are, and years ago. And he did a series of scholastic philosophy that is very available to the layperson. That would be a good start for philosophy. Sacred theology. I would start with St. Thomas's Summa Contra Gentiles. It's relatively short for St. Thomas.
I was going to say, is it 3 volumes, Your Excellency?
100 volumes instead of 200 volumes. No, I think it's, well, it depends on how they did it, but 2 to 3 relatively small volumes. He wrote that against the Muslims. And he has a lot of theology in there that is easier to digest because it's not as abstract as it is in the Summa Theologica. It's more, it's just easier. I would suggest that but there's, some other English theology manuals. So there's a Preuss. Now that's like a 10-volume set. That's in English. Then I'm trying to think of other ones in English. Not the English Tanqueray. It has been infected by certain modernists. There's an English Tanqueray, a dogmatic theology, and it's not good. And Ludwig Ott is not good. He has some modernist tendencies in there. I'm just trying to think of another dogma. There's something called The Teaching of the Catholic Church by Canon Smith, which is very good.
You recommended that before, Eric, and all the reasonably priced ones on eBay went away after the show. So you might want to check again for Teaching of the Catholic Church by Canon Smith. There may be some new ones on eBay, but I was one of the ones who tried to snap that up after the live stream. rush to my computer afterwards.
I should get some credit from these people.
You should. You should. Affiliate fee for His Excellency.
Yes, that's right.
Marie Catherine for $5. Thank you, Marie. Please recommend a good printed examination of conscience for regular confessions. How do I know if I'm properly disposed to receive communion? I'm going to answer the first question because His Excellency has answered it before. We have one, and we email it to people who request it, and usually they just give a goodwill donation. You've already done so with a super chat. So just send an email to the Contact Us form at MHT Seminary, and Father Bayer will send that to you. I'll pose the second question to His Excellency. How do I know I am properly disposed to receive communion?
You know, if you do an examination of conscience and you're not conscious of, at that point, any certain mortal sins, all right? So if you're in doubt about a mortal sin, you could go to communion. That it's only certain mortal sins that would keep you away, but it's not recommended, because you could have a lot of scruples about it. So, but if you're certain that you have venial sin on your soul, that does not keep you away from Holy Communion. But those that's the rules. Those are the rules. Certain mortal sin would mean that you would make a sacrilegious communion.
So certain versus doubtful, is that the distinction you're making?
Yes.
Okay. Teodoro Boggio, $5. Thank you, Teodoro. When did bishops lose authority after Vatican II? I guess that's the first question.
Well, in as much as what point, what day, I would say when they assented to Vatican II and promulgated it in their dioceses.
Did Archbishop Lucy of San Antonio have no authority then from 1965 to his forced resignation in 1969?
I have no idea who he is.
Right. Steve, as always, is starting to make himself a regular on these live streams. $5. Thank you, Steve. God bless you, Bishop Sanborn and Stephen from the massless city of Chicago. But Steve is continuing to make his point, and I think you will continue to make your point that we're stretched, and there are things that you have to do to prepare to have Mass anyway. So,
yeah, Chicago would be a good place to have a Mass center, and we also got a request for Atlanta a few days ago. Remember, but again, yes. The setting up a Mass center is not easy.
Duncan Maher, $50. Thank you, Duncan. Thank you to His Excellency, Mr. Heiner, everyone at the seminary for keeping the door open for those who haven't yet found the way. Well, I think he's alluding to the stops on the train, Your Excellency. The train stations are always open to receive people getting off at certain stops.
Yes.
Matthew is following up, $5 Australian. Thank you, Matthew. He was following up on the question about the grandfather. I was hoping His Excellency's answer to my earlier question that his grandfather was earthy, but I think we found out that his grandfather was very frank. So if you're hoping for frankness, Matthew, I think you can be consoled there. Fly Conclavism, €5. I think that's a good title, Your Excellency.
Yeah, that's a new one, yeah.
Hello, Your Excellency and Stephen. How many seminarians are coming next year, and where are they from?
Oh, you have to ask Father Bayer. Right now, it looks like about 8 new ones, but that could change. There are some interested, a few, 2 conked out that we had, we're expecting. So, but that's quite normal. I would say probably 8, maybe 10 as September rolls around. But that's a good question for Father Bayer. I just work here. See, Father Bayer keeps track of all those things, and he's away. So he's preaching a retreat in English in France.
Yes, next week. Yeah. Hello from Riverton, New Jersey. Oh, someone's in Riverton, Your Excellency.
Do we take these from Riverton, or are we these acceptable from Riverton?
Prayers for cooler weather in Reading.
Yes. Believe it or not, it's not as hot today as it was the past 2 days, but it's still pretty hot.
You're right.
And my office faces on the west, so the western sun heats up all the stone on this building, and it all seeps into this room. So that's why I have a handkerchief.
Brent Brandon for $5. Thank you, Brent. Your Excellency, my baptism was by Father Jenkins and my confirmation was by Bishop Fillet. Are those valid? Thank you and
Yes.
God bless.
Yes.
So no worries there.
Yeah.
I just got a copy of the Catechism of the Council of Trent. Tan Books had them on sale for $15. And I suppose as a note to people, we also have we have a leather-bound edition of the Catechism, the Council of Trent, in our bookstore, which I just put a link in the chat if you'd like to take a look. Zara, you did have one. Zara Pamon, he put a super chat in during the De La Suze live stream, Your Excellency, and it was for $10. Thank you, Zara. Your Excellency, could the intentional ambiguity of the Novus Ordo be a form of God protecting the Church, keeping the text open enough for a true believer to find traditional truth despite the potential for error?
No. The Holy Ghost is the spirit of truth. He's not the spirit of ambiguity. Ambiguity means that you could be led into falsehood. So you could take it the wrong way. The Catholic Church was never ambiguous about anything in its history. It was as clear as day about all of its truths. Now, the ambiguity is something that comes from the devil.
I remember a text something like, let your yes be yes and your no be no.
Yes. And above that is evil. If there's anything beyond that is evil. No.
Jaime for $10. Thank you, Jaime. Could Your Excellency recap why you say Messias, Isaiah, Jeremiah instead of Messiah, Isaiah, Jeremiah?
Because the Douay Rheims version carries that S at the end, because the Septuagint put the S at the end. The Septuagint was the Greek translation in the Old Testament of the Hebrew Scriptures. And the S was put on at the end in order to determine that the persons they're talking about were men. Because if it were just Messiah, as it is in Hebrew, and Isaiah, as it is in Hebrew, the Greeks, the Greek-speaking peoples that would read the Septuagint would say, these are women. You see, so Isaiah is just like in Latin, the us is a man, and a ends like Maria, ends in a. You see, so if it has no S on it in Latin, it's a woman. See, Marius would be the masculine, Maria would be the feminine. So that's the same in Greek. So that came over to the Vulgate, and the Douay Rheims was translated from the Vulgate, so it came over into the Douay Rheims. It's very Catholic to say Messias, Isaiah, and Jeremiah. It is somewhat un-Catholic to say it the other way, although there's nothing wrong with it. The Jewish would actually have a sort of a guttural sound at the end. Mashiach. That would be that in Hebrew. That Mashiach. That's the original. So even Messiah is an anglicization of it.
We have JGB 777 for $50 joining from Maryland. Thank you, JGB. If you have a question, please feel free to put that in the chat and I'll do my best to read that. His Excellency noted that Father Bayer is preaching a retreat, and this dovetails with a question we'd had, which was, does your institute offer any Ignatian retreat programs in France during August? And I'm posting that now.
He's not doing an Ignatian retreat. I think the others are doing. The French are doing Ignatian.
Yes.
Retreat.
So I put the dates in there: 6th through the 11th of July, and the 3rd through 8th. So we already passed the ones in July. The 3rd through the 8th for men, and the 24th to the 29th of August for women. Those are Ignatian. And then, as His Excellency noted, Father Bayer is preaching a retreat next week. It's probably too late, but I don't want to speak for Father. So I put a link to the website there. So if you're an English speaker and you live in Europe and you want to get over for a retreat, there may still be space. I don't want to speak for Father, but you can use the link I put in the chat for Notre Dame des Dons, and it will let you know. You can contact Father that way. A follow-up here, Yarsi, I think you're going to say that they probably have to contact us, but I'll read it. Since my confirmation is invalid and I'm not Catholic, what am I to do? The priest who confirmed me was ordained before 1968. Would this make any difference?
I don't understand this. My confirmation is invalid and I'm not Catholic. I don't know. That doesn't go together.
I don't know, Your Excellency. I think it might just be an opportunity to talk about the fact that a priest could, in normal times, be given the power to confirm by a special indult.
And by a special indult, and Pope Pius XII said, if you don't have the indult, it is invalid. He made that very clear. All right, so this idea of priests doing confirmations without, Novus Ordo, they do it, they permit everything. Mm-hmm. So, but I don't understand this question. How could you be confirmed if you're not Catholic?
Right. So if you would like to send your question in using the Contact Us form, you might be able to clarify that, and one of the clergy can give you a bit more clarity on your particular case. As always, His Excellency says it's very hard for us to talk about particular cases in a live stream because he has to ask follow-up questions, and sometimes we need photos or a video or something like that. How can the Pope be validly elected if all the cardinals are heretics?
Because they are not juridically heretics. And this is always the problem that people do not understand. And that is that you can be factually guilty of something, but not juridically guilty of something. It happens, I won't use any examples, but there is a current trial going on and the whole world knows that he did it. Let's put it that way. All right. Everybody knows that he did it. A certain assassination, let's say. All right. But before the law, he is as innocent as a lamb until he is adjudicated as a criminal. See, and the church works the same way. The church is not a mob. You can't say, well, I think this one's a heretic. I think you're a heretic. You think I'm a heretic. And then you're outside of the church. No, it's juridical. So that means that they have not been juridically separated from the Catholic Church and are capable of juridical functions. This is true of the Patriarch of Constantinople, Nestorius, who became a heretic on Christmas Day, public heretic on Christmas Day, saying Our Lady was not the Mother of God. He was not condemned juridically until 431 at the Council of Ephesus, and when he arrived, he was given the honors of the Patriarch of Constantinople. Because the church constantly observes that. It is not a mob. In the South, there would be black men strung up on a tree because the white people in the town would say, he did it. This one did it. This one did it. And then they would all go out into the forest and string up somebody. That's a mob. And they had no right to do that. See, there has to be a trial. There has to be a sentence. And people don't understand that. You can't have a juridical effect without a juridical sentence. Do you ever notice how in the news they say it is reported, or they use the term allegedly? See, because they cannot say that somebody is actually guilty. They would get sued. See, but they say allegedly. It's a magic word. That's because juridically they are as innocent as lambs. See, even though everybody knows that he did it.
Yeah, along these same lines, you're actually in terms of framing. Someone was very surprised, scandalized, however you want to say. I can't believe His Excellency said that those 4 SSPX bishops were Catholics. They're clearly not. They don't believe what we believe. How can His Excellency call them Catholic? This is so scandalous.
Well, they have the Catholic faith. I mean, the Catholic faith does not exclude being mistaken about certain things, especially in good conscience.
So that's your assertion that if insofar as they're in good conscience, they're acting mistakenly as Catholics.
They're mistaken. I mean, I was mistaken for years about certain things. I mean, the situation in the church is hard to understand. And no, they're just mistaken, but they have the Catholic faith. I mean, they did that profession of faith that they sent to Leo. It was a very beautiful thing. No, there's no question about their faith. There's a question about their positions and their incoherence and various indeficiencies like that. But it's not a question of their faith, not at all.
I think it's probably because you used to be there yourself, Your Excellency, so you knew that you were Catholic at that time, even though you were mistaken about certain things.
Yes, mistaken, yes.
Even let's say the Novus Ordo Seminary, you were still a Catholic, but you were mistaken about.
I was there. I thought, well, Paul VI is totally Orthodox. He's wonderful. He's probably a saint, but he has a bad entourage. That's what I was thinking back in the 1960s.
As Father Cicada used to say, if only the Holy Father knew.
Yes, yes,
That's
yes.
always what was being put around.
Yeah,
And
no, that was the standard fare in the 60s.
is it a sin to say stupid or to use the word hell?
Well, if somebody or something particular, it might be uncharitable to say somebody is stupid, uh, especially it's kind of strong, and but some people are stupid. I'm sorry to say. The So that should generally be avoided. But some statement could be stupid, or something that's inanimate could be stupid. Uh, Hell should not be used casually, but to say that something is from hell, or somebody is probably going to hell. There's nothing wrong with that, but it shouldn't be used like hell of a this or that's vulgar, and just shouldn't be done. It's anything that's vulgar should be avoided.
Matthew Arthur, $5 Australian. Thank you, Matthew. It's very interesting to hear the story of His Excellency's ancestry. I like the Irish direct approach to communication. It's better than passive aggressive politeness.
Yes, yes, yes. I don't know if I told the story of my grandfather throwing the map on the floor. Did I ever?
You have alluded to it, but it's always fine to refresh a Sanborn family memory, Your Excellency.
Yes, we're getting the National Geographic. I was quite young. I would say maybe 6 or 7, and the National Geographic came, and they used to include once in a while a map. And so he opens the map, and it's the British Isles, and of course Ireland is on there, and he throws it on the floor and says, "Ireland is not British." So I got the message.
Message received.
He had no use for the British. I'm sorry to say. He said that Hitler never did anything to the Jews which the English didn't first do to the Irish. He always said that.
Oh, no lies detected, as the young people say.
So no, he had.
Is Introduction to Philosophy by Daniel Sullivan okay to read, or is there a better?
Never heard of it.
I think it was put out by Tan, Your Excellency, as just sort of a
I'd
primer.
have to check it. Monsignor Glenn is the best.
Okay. Do you agree that baptism of desire and baptism of blood are valid, but being in any other faith without leaving those faiths before death condemns you?
That's a complicated question. Baptism of blood and baptism of desire are the teaching of the Catholic Church. Right? To deny that would be a heresy. And it does apply to those who are, or could apply to those who are, first of all, in invincible ignorance of the Catholic faith. That is, it would be very difficult for them to, for one reason or another, to learn about it. That's known as invincible ignorance. And secondly, they would have to have supernatural faith. They would have to believe at least some dogmas of revelation that have been revealed by supernatural faith. They would have to have perfect contrition for their sins, and they would have to at least implicitly desire to be part of the church which Christ founded. That is a big stack of conditions. People think, oh, you're saying Protestants can go to heaven. That's a big stack of conditions, but it would accomplish what is necessary for the justification of their souls before baptism, and that they could achieve heaven. They could. All right, that's the church teaching.
So that was a super chat from ABCD for $10. Thank you for that, ABCD. One of the Harrisburg parishioners did the math for you, Your Excellency. Looked on the website. 18.
Oh, good.
So now it's a dozen and a half.
Good.
Matthew Joseph, $10. Thank you, Matthew. Your Excellency, we know there will be a mass conversion of the Jews before the end of time to the Catholic religion and not the Novus Ordo religion. Wonder if this means a true pope someday.
I would say very probably it does. Romans chapter 11 is very clear about the conversion of the Jews before the end of time. So I would say most probably so, but we don't know. See, it's obscure.
Said a Trad 47, $10. Thank you. Is it normal to feel an attraction toward religious life more strongly when one is praying in a church and less strongly when you leave?
Not necessarily. No, I mean your prayer is more intense in a church, and you go back into the world. You come out of the church. No, but you shouldn't base it on one or the other. In other words, you shouldn't say, "Well, I feel this when I'm outside, and I feel this when I'm inside." You have to look for. You have to ask yourself the question: do I want to do with my life what is most pleasing to God? That is a vocation. In other words, if the answer to that is yes, and a real yes, with all of it implies, that's a vocation. So, but if it's, well, I don't know, and well, it seems nice, things like that, you'll never last. You have to be dead determined to go through with it, and to follow the vocation.
Actually, when I think about the religious life, I always go back to the rich young man, because if you would be perfect, that
Yes.
that call to something higher, and he went away sad. It's not for everybody.
There's a picture of that right outside my door. I purposely put it there. For seminarians that might be tempted to leave.
It's a useful reminder, and it's as you would expect from His Excellency, it's a well executed picture as well. Is the anti-Christian conspiracy already out from Brent? 8 of the 10 of the pre-release are done. His Excellency continues to work on the proofreading of it, but before the end of the year, the full edition will be out in English. The first time that a manual translation has been done. Some may have been attempted with AI, but His Excellency has been monitoring this project very closely from the beginning and making corrections. And so you're going to be getting basically a Bishop Sanborn corrected English text.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy Hunjin for £10, Your Excellency.
We are finally.
To be fair, we only got to it now. We only got to it now.
What time is it in England? It's only midnight in England.
He posted it about 40 minutes ago. We're only getting to this chat now, but we can say the live stream is now valid and licit because Jimmy has given a super chat. Thank you, Jimmy. Does His Excellency think that you might have an exodus of other Father Hennicks from the SSPX as the months roll on? And I suppose people might not know who Father Hennick is, so a very brief explanation there, Your Excellency.
Yes, he came to us, I think in November. He left the SSPX in the spring of last year. So that means 2025. And he went home for a while just to think things over. And he's a very cautious person and thoughtful person in the sense, he doesn't do things easily or without thought. And now he's taking care of our church in Lawrence, Massachusetts. Would there be more? I highly doubt it. Maybe 1 or 2, something like that. Very, very, very small number. But I think my experience with SSPX is that their priests do not think. I know that's kind of a nasty accusation, but everything is Archbishop Lefebvre, Archbishop Lefebvre, Archbishop Lefebvre. He's the saint that has led us through this crisis, and all we have to do is think about what he said. That means there's no theology in their heads. See, you can't talk to them on a theological basis, like to give them arguments and they respond. They won't do that. And not by any bad will. It's just they are just trained to be marchers in the Lefebvre army. And so I think that they will just stay with the whole thing and just say, well, we can ignore the Pope. I call their position now papacy vacantism. Papacy vacantism. We are sedevacantists. We say the see is empty in the sense that he doesn't have the power, but they are papacy vacantists. It's as if Rome doesn't exist.
Did you see that they recently made an appeal, Your Excellency, using canon law?
Yes. Again, you can't appeal against the Supreme Court. You can't, it's the final word. The Pope, I mean, if he is the Pope, he explained exactly what he was going to do. If you do this, you will incur the automatic excommunication. They did it. They incurred it, and it was declared. Where do you go from there? I mean, that's what the Vatican's going to say.
It seems in the new code there's some provision for an appeal, Your Excellency, but some canon lawyers have already pointed out that the reply might be, I don't know what the Society of St. Pius X is. You don't have standing to bring an appeal. that
That's
society was suppressed in 1976. I don't know who the Society of St. Pius X is in the church.
You can't appeal against the Pope, though. The moral theologian Prummer says all pontifical excommunications are valid, period. It's only the lower ones done for other reasons and by lower authorities that where you could have an invalidity possible and therefore an appeal. But he was intimately involved in this excommunication. I mean, he ordered it and he talked about it and he said why they are being excommunicated because they don't agree with Vatican II. I mean, he could not have been more explicit. There's nothing else to say, you know. And appeal. I mean, they ignore him and then they appeal.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. They act as if he doesn't exist, and then when they want him to exist, they make an appeal. You know, he is elevated again to existence, and then they act as if he doesn't exist. It's all absurd. It's a crazy merry-go-round of contradictions and inconsistencies.
I think if you would like to repeat the title of Monsignor de la Sousa's book in French, Your Excellency.
La Conjuration Antichrétienne.
So the anti-Christian conspiracy is how it translates into English, and people are excited to see that Jimmy is back.
Yeah,
so
finally.
Matthew, he woke up, might have been. Matthew Arthur, $5 Thank you, Matthew. I've started reading the anti-Christian conspiracy. Voltaire was a huge bag of dirt. His quotes are outrageous and the peak of immaturity.
He was probably one of the biggest bags of dirt that ever existed.
Might I know, Your Excellency, in your top 5, he was number 1, if you remember.
Yes.
When someone pressed you on that.
Yes. He is an enormous bag of dirt, you know, as big as the planet Earth.
Hmm. Sol de Klerk, $8. Thank you, Sol. If popes can speak infallibly, what purpose do ecumenical councils serve? Why has this power been formally invoked so rarely across church history?
For various reasons. One is that a council, first of all, the Pope might want to consult, you see, with the bishops what they think about a certain dogma. More importantly, however, it serves to solemnize the dogmas more than if the Pope spoke only by himself. So he is not bound to ever call a council, not ever. But it does solemnize the teaching. It brings it, it gives it prominence, you might say, more than what you'd call a papal decree. There was another, why so rarely? Because popes are not required to call them, and they only call them when they feel they have to. So that's the reason for that.
Okay. Jimmy Hunjin, £5. Thank you, Jimmy. John the 23rd appears to me as a liturgical conservative, but a doctrinal modernist. Would this be accurate?
I would say that's accurate, yes. You know, he called for the preservation of Latin. He wrote an encyclical on the preservation of Latin. And yeah, I would say that he had certain conservative aspects about him. He was pious, you know, you know, he had a certain Italian piety, you might say, you know, his favorite devotions and all. But he was a modernist, definitely a modernist. He was a modernist even as a seminarian in the 1890s.
A certain Englishman is asking, what did he miss so far, Your Excellency? We're an hour and 13 minutes into the stream. Swamp and tea. It's someone English living in Florida, I think. We've got about 45 minutes left in the stream. Swamp and tea, you've missed what normally happens in all of these live streams. His Excellency answering questions nonstop. So you'll be able to go back. Another reminder to hit the like button if you haven't done so already, and let us know where you are watching or listening from. Tommy L107, £10. Thank you, Tommy. Your Excellency, why can't we be sedevacantist in the most narrow sense? The Pope is invalid as he fails to meet the standard of infallibility, but all other clergy are valid as they are not infallible.
Valid. I'm not following what he's saying there. Why can't we say that? In other words, that only Leo would be considered invalid, but everybody else is okay. Is that I'm trying to?
Yeah, I feel like that's where he's going, but that doesn't really make any sense.
No, because if they are in communion with him, And if they assent to Vatican II and its heresies, they are in the same boat as Leo.
And obviously, there's a distinction between valid in office and valid sacramentally.
Valid is a broad word. In other words, it's a word that can mean many things.
ABCD for $20. Thank you, ABCD. Could John the 23rd's ruling of cremation as a valid choice for Catholics when it was already condemned as a mortal sin and a heretical act, which directly denied the resurrection of the dead, prove he taught from the chair false teaching?
No, because that would be cremation, even under the old pre-Vatican II rules, was permitted in the case of plague and also war. In other words, it's not intrinsically evil. However, it is extrinsically evil in the sense that it does represent the denial of the resurrection, typically used by Freemasons and other enemies of the church. So, but it is not intrinsically evil, because really burning a body is no different from its oxidization in the grave. It's just a much slower oxidization in the grave. That's all. It's the same thing. But it is associated historically with those who deny the resurrection of the dead, and that's why it was not permitted. But strictly speaking, the church could lift that. You see, it's a discipline. It's not intrinsically evil. If it were intrinsically evil, it could never permit it.
It wouldn't be permitted, as you noted before. Absolutely right. This is somewhat related to modern current politics. I don't know if you've been following in the north of Ireland, in Belfast. This is from Richard Nixon for $20. I don't really think it's from Richard Nixon, but Your Excellency, what are your thoughts on the unrest after the beheading in Belfast, where some illegal migrants were forced from their dwellings? Is there any amount of abuse taken by citizens that warrants such an act?
Who got their head chopped off?
There was a again, I'm not very up to date on this, but I think there was some Irish person who was beheaded, and again, I'm happy to be corrected in the chat.
I remember that. Yes,
and then people reacted, going around neighborhoods and expelling people.
That's wrong. You can never take the law into your own hands. That's a general Catholic principle. The enforcement of the law depends upon authority. Now, you can never harm anybody or in any way disturb the peace on your own authority, which of course doesn't exist.
But in a sense, an understandable reaction, Your Excellency.
Yes, outrage, certainly, but a wrong reaction. You have to learn to control yourself. But it should be a wake-up call for the Irish, and get rid of that stinking government that they have.
Well, I don't know if you've seen. There was a Black Nigerian lady who was elected the mayor of Galway, and I think a Miss Ireland who was also a Nigerian. So I think things have gotten out of hand in Ireland in terms of the migration problem.
Just think of what my grandfather would have said about that. You
know. We'll go back to what his frankness might have told us, and you can imagine it.
Yes,
and
yes.
I think that would answer. DVM 1111 for $10. Thank you, DVM. St. Alphonsus teaches in one of his sermons that God may cease to pardon a person after a certain number of mortal sins. Can His Excellency explain that? A repentant sinner can be denied forgiveness?
Well, in order for someone who has fallen into mortal sin obtain forgiveness, God must send him an actual grace. He is not bound, once you have slapped him in the face with mortal sin, to send an actual grace to you to draw you out of mortal sin. Think of falling into a well. You can't get out until someone throws a rope to you. You're finished in there. You're going to starve to death down there. The same is true of persons who commit mortal sin after mortal sin. And St. Alphonsus teaches that, yes, there's only a certain amount that God will tolerate, and then you don't get the rope down at the bottom of the well. That you're there, you're going to die down there. You're going to go to hell. See, that's what he's saying. It's not to say that God would not pardon a repentant sinner. It's just to say, in order that you repent, you need an actual grace, and that can only come from God.
We have a $10 dollars Canadian from Giselle Demers. Thank you, Giselle. If you have a question, please feel free to put that in the chat. Far in the future in New Zealand, Your Excellency. So they're in Saturday. It's Saturday in New Zealand, and far into Saturday, the Waitakere Ranges. That's to the west of Auckland. This is geography I do know well, Your Excellency.
All right. Okay.
When it comes to New Zealand,
they're the first for the in other words, the first big country for the sun to rise. I think there's some islands there, I think, but they're the first country to get the sun according to all the reckoning of time.
Right. If you're thinking of New Caledonia, Vanuatu, all those smaller ones, but yes,
they got it before.
The big first one. Sort of all these exclamation marks. What do you think of the Palmarian Church and Pope Peter III? In case anyone doubts, His Excellency can tell us.
Well, I think it's a totally bogus thing. I mean, don't even think about it. It's just something that you pity the people involved in it because it's so absurd. That's all I can say about it.
Flos Florum, 1963, 10 Australian dollars. Thank you, Flos. Your Excellency, what is your take on J.R.R. Tolkien's Legendarium? If you've read the books or watched the films, have you enjoyed them?
Well, first of all, I should say that I detest literature. I think reading novels is a waste of time, and all I want is the facts. There used to be a show called Dragnet, and Jack Webb would say, "Just the facts, ma'am." And that's the way I feel. I want to read history. I want to read things that really happened. So literature is not high on my list, to say the least. Secondly, I watched the film, whatever that is about. I forget the name of it. And I stayed with it until the trees started talking. And then I said, this is crazy. This is just absolutely insane that trees should be talking. These big oak trees should be talking. And I shut it off and never thought about Tolkien again after that. So I'm really not in a good position to comment on this.
And as His Excellency has said, and we've said before, His Excellency is not the person to ask about this because he doesn't read this. If Bishop Dolan were around, he would be the person to ask about this sort of stuff. Poetry, that sort of thing.
Yes.
And that's...
just the facts, ma'am.
Just facts. So the fact that His Excellency doesn't like it doesn't mean that you can't like it too.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I mean, he was a good Catholic, actually, Tolkien. And I think he was anti-Vatican II. I know that.
Yes.
So, I mean, there's nothing against Tolkien. It's just, I can't stand fiction like that, just stories. I want to read a history book.
Are Bishop Williamson's consecrations valid?
Oh, that's a big question. First of all, we don't know what he did and which ones he did. I mean, there are claims, but do we see certificates? Do we have eyewitnesses? It was all done very secretly. And I was told that all he did was the matter and form. In other words, the hands and then pronouncing the form. But we don't know what he did. So I can't even pronounce on that. We don't know what he did.
Until we get some kind of photographic or video record published.
Yes. I just don't know.
The Sedevacantists view that Leo is not the true pope. Doesn't this confirm orthodoxy? They may say that this is what happens when one man's in charge. You only need one to destroy the religion.
No, that has nothing to do with it. No, they deny something that the primacy of the Roman pontiff, which is something that is clear from the early church. Twice they accepted it in 1274, and again in 1439 they accepted the primacy of the Roman pontiff, and then they went back to their people. Their people didn't like it, and then they returned to the vomit of their schism because their people didn't like it. So I mean, they know that the Roman pontiff is the vicar of Christ on earth. They accepted it twice. At 1274 at Lyons, they sang during the creed the Filioque 3 times. Filioque, Filioque, Filioque. Now tell me that they are in good conscience after that.
Yeah, and as if papal primacy is the only problem. They also allow divorce. There's a number of problems when you separate from the church. Other errors are going to creep in. The idea that there's only this one problem with so-called orthodoxy is
right.
silly.
No, they have gone astray. They have gone down the way of Protestants.
So, K-Beautician, these no pay the questions are good. Too bad you only answer paid questions. We could all benefit. K-Beautician, I want to point out you posted that at 5:53, 30 minutes ago. I'm only now getting to this question, and I have read other non-paid questions. It's a practical matter. So, for an hour and 24 minutes, I've been asking questions which we got emailed to us before and the super chat. So, if we were to read every single question that were in here, His Excellency would be here for 4 hours. And it's my job to make sure that he doesn't stay here for 4 hours because Father Desposito would kill me. And I don't want to be killed at this time. Dominic, $5. Thank you, Dominic. Is it sinful to walk in churches where validly consecrated hosts were distributed on the hand in the Novus Ordo, scattering particles on the floor?
Well, I can't think of that case. Validly, that's a Novus Ordo church.
It would have to be the case I'm thinking, Your Excellency. It would have been one of the Fraternity of St. Peter priests that was ordained by Archbishop Lefebvre, who has a parish that is shared with the Novus Ordo.
Oh,
and
perhaps.
those hosts may be distributed at the Novus Ordo.
Validly consecrated hosts. You would have to pay great attention to where you were walking, but in itself, it's not wrong to walk into a non-Catholic church to see the church or something like that.
Right. And I don't even know how anyone would know. How would you detect which hosts were distributed? Are you putting a GPS marker on these hosts?
No, I think you could, in good conscience, just walk in. Yes.
Brent Brandon for $5. Thank you, Brent. Although I reject the Novus Ordo, in a way I'm thankful for it. It led me to true Catholicism after being a Protestant for a long time and being an atheist.
Yes, Protestants see Protestantism in the Novus Ordo very clearly. It's what they abandoned, and so they are easily drawn to the traditional faith. I've noticed that over the years.
Jimmy Hunjin, £5. I'm greatly looking forward to the retreat. I'm heading to France tomorrow. It looks like someone else is also going to France. So the retreat will be fruitful. They'll get to see Father Bayer. Your Excellency, if the Archbishop was sede, why did Bishop Gerard Delorier get removed from his teaching position?
Because Archbishop Lefebvre was primarily a diplomat. In other words, he saw as the solution to the church that he would build up a great many people and priests, exactly what happened, and that the Vatican would be convinced to give the experiment of tradition. See, at the time, back in the 70s, they were doing experimental liturgies, and he was asking them, do the experiment of tradition, and you will see that this will flourish. And he was right about that. It did flourish. And he said the new Mass will never continue because people just won't go to it, and that's happening too. So to give him credit, but in order to do that, he had to recognize the Novus Ordo so-called popes as true popes, because you can't do diplomacy with somebody whom you say is phony or false. See, so he was brutal against anybody who would say that he's not a true pope, because he couldn't carry on his diplomacy that way. But in his heart, he knew that they were not real popes.
And he said so in different circumstances and in different ways.
Yes.
Teodoro Borgio, $2. Thank you, Teodoro. How is Tanqueray's dogmatic theology in English bad?
By bad translations, by modernist translators. We were using it as a matter of fact, and we came across things, and we checked the Latin, and it was bad. Yes.
So it had to go.
Yes. Spazzatura, as they say in Italian. That means garbage can.
Roberto Rocha for $10. Thank you, Roberto. Your Excellency, what is your opinion about the conclavism? I think what he means is moving towards a conclave.
Well, that is something. I mean, they mean well. Everybody means well in this thing. But it's as absurd as my going out into the street in my neighborhood and saying, "Vote for me for president, and I'll be the president of the United States if you vote for me." And all the people come out of their homes and say, "I vote for you," and then I present myself as the president of the United States. That's how insane it is. People would say I'm crazy. They would bring me to the insane asylum. See, so you can't vote for somebody unless you have the right to vote. See, and just a bunch of bishops who are consecrated to give sacraments and not to rule the church, but merely to give sacraments, have no more right to vote than the man that delivers the mail to your home or the man that picks up the garbage. They have no more right to vote than he does. You see, so it's utterly and totally absurd, but they mean well. In other words, they see a problem, they're trying to fix it, but it's just going to make the problem worse because it'll make Sedevacantists look absurd.
Jeffrey Frizzone had remarked about the Edition Saint-Remy translation of the Anti-Christian Conspiracy, Your Excellency, but you had a chance to look at that. That was an AI translation.
Yeah, it was an AI, and there were a lot of mistakes in it. I noticed a lot of mistakes.
So not a good call there, Jeffrey. If you want to get a real copy, you'll have to wait later this year to get a human translated version. Yes. Polo Labrahada for £5. Thank you, Polo. Hello from Belfast, Your Excellency, the home of your grandparents, if I remember. How does a nostalgic visit sound? I will personally cook you dinner.
Somebody just asked me today, have you ever gone to Ireland? I said, no. I said, if my mother were alive, she would shoot me. You know, that I've been to all of these European countries and all around them and all of these places, and I've never been to Ireland, you know. And she would always say, why don't you go to Ireland? You know, and well, I don't have time. I'll be in England, or, you know, all this. And well, can a Catholic priest walk around Belfast today? That would be a good question. I don't know. I mean, there were times when he couldn't, but yes, I even know where they lived in Belfast.
Well, you're giving all sorts of encouragement here. I want to make sure people know that, you know, it's not as if His Excellency. I have asked His Excellency numerous times, having been to Ireland numerous times myself, and I would like him to go, but he does have a lot on his plate, and he doesn't usually ever get to travel for leisure. So I think that's probably the primary barrier for that. My
grandparents were Frank and Mary Murray, very Irish names. Yes, Frank and Mary Murray. Yes. So, and my mother always drove it into us that we were mostly Irish. So.
It's important to know where you come from, Your Excellency.
Yeah.
Matthew Joseph for $10. Thank you, Matthew. What term would we use to call those who adhere to and profess the Novus Ordo religion because they believe it to be still the Catholic religion? Would they be heretics in any sense?
Well, I call them Novus Ordites, which really says everything. In other words, they profess to be Catholics, but they adhere to heretical dogmas. Probably many of them, but many don't, in good conscience. They're told that these things are true, and it comes down from Rome, and they believe them. So they would be heretics, at least what we call material heretics. And most of them are material heretics. In other words, they believe things that are heretical. Formal heresy means you know what the traditional teaching is, but you reject it and you welcome this new religion. That's a formal heretic, and that's a very serious sin. You go to hell for that. See, so that's, you know, they want to be Catholic. You know, they profess to be Catholic, many of them, but they adhere to heretical doctrines. If they adhere in good conscience, then strictly speaking, they're not heretics formally. But if they adhere in bad conscience, and I think many do, then they are very, very seriously sinning and are not Catholics. Formal heresy outside the church automatically.
What do you think of using it as an adjective? You're actually Novus Ordo Catholics. What do you think of that term?
Well, it's true in the sense that it says Novus Ordo, which is the new religion, but they profess to be Catholics. You see, so in that sense, that's legitimate, I would say. I like Novus Ordites better. But it is a very unusual case because normally heretics are expelled from the church legally. And so there's no question, Lutherans, Presbyterians, you see. But in this case, we have heretics inside the walls of the church. You see, so in that sense, they have not been kicked out of the church, but they are heretics inside the walls of the church. And so that's unique to history.
Diane Alice, $5. Thank you, Diane. Thank you to His Excellency for taking the time to share his knowledge. Yes, thank you, Excellency. We're always grateful for that. Jerry Travers, $20. Thank you, Jerry. What is His Excellency's pastoral advice for laity struggling with spiritual dryness?
Spiritual dryness is actually a good sign. It means you're making progress in the spiritual life. God takes away the consolations, what is known as the consolations, where you feel good about praying, you feel good about your devotions, it gives you joy, and then he takes that away. And so as Saint Teresa says, he wants you to love the God of the consolations and not the consolations of God. So it's the entrance into the second phase of the spiritual life, which is higher than the first phase, obviously. And so you must do all of your spiritual works based on love of God alone, pure love of God, and not because you feel good about it. That's spiritual dryness. And that might last for a long time. And if you persevere in that, you would get to the perfect state.
As a reminder, if you haven't done so already, please hit the like button. We are 3/4 of the way through our stream today, and that will continue to help get the word out to people. Stephen Griffith, DC, for $2. Thank you, Stephen. How binding is quo primum?
It isn't. It was the promulgation of the Missal by Pius V, and it is a law of the Church. As if you assume that these Vatican II popes are popes, they can undo quo primum. There's a principle in law that an equal does not have power against an equal. See, so they could say quo primum no longer is in effect. It's just a law. You see, so it's not. It doesn't have any binding power as a doctrine. It's just a law. So in that sense, a very, very weak argument to argue from quo primum.
AAA, $8 Thank you, AAA. From His Holiness Pius X. Many years would have to pass before the liturgical edifice could be purified of the squalidness brought by time. What was squalid in 1913?
I don't know, because I don't know what he's referring to at that point.
What comes to mind, Your Excellency, is the memoirs of Cardinal Mary Del Val, and His Holiness was talking about some of the liturgical decorations that they would hang these rags. He would call them rags, but these sort of red banners that would cover up.
Yes.
So if I'm thinking of, he might be thinking of if the term squalid would be applied here. I don't think it would be to the liturgy.
I see the context of that comment, but it's always true that just like there are, you go into your garden, you do some trimming now and again. The Church has always done some trimming. Things, pop up. People think it's a good idea to do this, and local customs and so forth. The Church has to keep an eye on that and do some, as I said, trimming here and there, and some corrections and improvements. That's nothing wrong with that in the history of the Church. The Church has always done that. The question is, what kind of improvements are you making, so to speak? In other words, are we introducing ideas that are modernist? But if it's Pius V codified and he did some improvements in the Mass. He added the last Gospel. He added the prayers at the foot of the altar. Various other, as I said previously, the elevation was added, the elevation of the host and the chalice, because of a heresy in the 1100s, Berengarius. So, it's not something that is absolutely static. There could be. It's like a plant that grows and is trimmed occasionally and watered and so forth.
Jimmy Hungen for £20. Thank you, Jimmy. I think Father Cicada's coining of the term mentivacantism in relation to Bishop Williamson's theory has been adopted by the SSPX at large. They act as though the Pope has a form of amnesia and has just forgotten Catholicism.
Yes, yeah, that's Bishop Williamson said they can't be heretics because they don't have any kind of no sense of immutable truth. That's what he said. And Father Cicada called that mentivacantism.
Yes.
Yes.
People forget Father Cicada coined the motu mass. He coined recognize and resist.
Oh, he did.
Everybody who uses these terms now, these are all Father Cicada isms.
Yes. Yes.
About to Palma, $5. Thank you. I've read and heard mixed things. Is it sinful to use swear words in any and all contexts?
It would be venially sinful unless it's something that refers to something filthy. But it's venially sinful in normal conversation because it's a form of lack of justice to those around you. You're lowering their standard. In other words, you're saying you talk like this. This is so it is a lack of respect to those around you. But if a bunch of sailors, in a bar start using it, it is so common for them to use it that it most probably would not be sinful. That's
for them.
language.
Yes. Not for you to join in.
Not for you to join in. No.
I always heard the classic case where actually you drop your hammer on your toe and then you say something, and
yes.
That's not.
Oh well, that's known as primo primi. Anything you do primo primi is not a sin because you know to think about it. You see,
right, something just comes out.
Yeah.
We're heading into the final 20 minutes of the live stream. So if you have super chats, now is a time to get those in, and I will do my best to get to them. I'm now going to finish up with our email questions that were sent before time. Your Excellency, I've only recently learned about the Catholic teaching on predestination, and I'm not sure how it works with free will.
Well, predestination means that God preordains that certain people will go to heaven. He doesn't preordain that certain people will go to hell in the sense that you have no chance of going to heaven. See, but he preordains, that means from all eternity, he knows and wills that some people will go to heaven, and he gives them all of the graces necessary to go to heaven. That is Catholic predestination. That's to be in the book of life. The Catholic rule is if you go to heaven, it's because God has drawn you. If you go to hell, it's through your own fault. Now, you say, well, how does that work with free will? God cannot violate the free will of human beings because it would be against his essence. He would have to destroy free will in order to violate it. That's the nature of the free will. And theologians say that because he is the author of grace and the author of free will, that those two things cannot be opposed one to another, and somehow he draws people by using their free will. But it is mysterious. Definitely, nobody has the absolute answer to it.
I know that lying is always sinful, with proper distinctions being made between malicious, officious, and jocose lies. What type of lie is it when an undercover police officer changes his identity and tells many lies in order to infiltrate and gain the trust of criminal organizations like the mafia and outlaw biker gangs? Are these lies and deceptions venial or mortal sins?
I would say they're mortal sins.
So it's a mortal sin to go undercover, Your Excellency?
It's a mortal sin to speak against your mind. It's intrinsically evil.
Well, that's an interesting topic. I think we'll have to save for another time. I know a bunch of people are going to have questions about that, so I'm going to skip right over that. I've heard His Excellency speak of a valid pope being protected from teaching heresy to the church because of the Petrine Promise. I'm not familiar with the Petrine Promise. Is this merely His Excellency's opinion, or is there more to it?
No, the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. You see?
So it's not just your opinion.
No. When our Lord said, I will send the Spirit of truth, and he will teach you all things whatsoever I've commanded you. So both of those, the Spirit of truth, and who will teach you all things, and also the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Notice he uses the word prevail, because they're going to bang at the door. It doesn't say you will never have a problem. The gates of hell the gates of hell is a Hebraism meaning the powers of hell. They will be kept at bay from the church. He doesn't say that. He said the gates of hell shall not prevail against the church. In other words, don't worry. They're banging at the door. They're throwing, darts in. You'll be under siege, but they're not going to prevail. And the church has been under siege either from external persecution or from heresy all through her existence. She has never had a time when she didn't have one or the other, and sometimes she had both. And she has been resilient all the way through, and she's being resilient now.
Is St. Augustine's Confessions a good read for people who are quite new in coming to the faith and find his story inspiring? Do you have any way to help with the reading of the book?
I would recommend that. it's a little deep here and there, but his whole story of his conversion from a life of sin and heresy and everything to where he is very interesting, and it's inspiring to anybody who has had a similar experience. I would recommend that.
Along those same lines, Your Excellency, from ABCD for $2, thank you. What devotions does His Excellency hold most dear or recommend?
Well, I don't have a set of favorite devotions. I'm sorry to say, I have all the standard devotions, to Our Lady and to the Blessed Sacrament, and but I don't have sort of a, like a special devotion. I don't. Maybe that's kind of shameful.
This is a classic Bishop Dolan question, Your Excellency. I mean, it would change on the day of the week. So if it's Tuesdays, we're saying these devotions. Wednesdays. So unfortunately, that's not His Excellency.
We just had as a kid, we had what you call very standard Catholicism. It was church on Sunday, also Mass during the week and Lent. I remember going to Mass every day in Lent before I went to school. It was, I would say, standard fare Catholicism, but pious. But we, I don't know, maybe because Irish are not as emotional as, say, Italian, Spanish, that have these special devotions. It just was Catholicism.
And I would say His Excellency is a rosary walker. He's one of those who often will say his rosary on a walk. And
yes, and you ruined it. I usually do it around now, but you ruined it.
I apologize, Your Excellency. I've heard previously from His Excellency that you have to shun those who don't keep the faith. And despite verbal conversation and my open disapproval for my friend's atheist or humanist beliefs, as a teenager, this would require me to shun all of my friends and the people I know, leaving me socially ostracized. Would I still shun people in this case?
Well, moral theologians say that Catholics should not associate with non-Catholics except for a serious reason. See, so that's all I could say. Now, you might have a serious reason. Business, for example, might be a serious reason. Very often it is.
But this person's a teenager, you see. I mean, would you say they're schoolmates and they have to do projects together, or they have to do work together?
That's a serious reason. It's just that as a rule, you would not make them close friends, but you would be civil to them. You would, if they're neighbors, hello, how are you? Or fellow students, you shouldn't be like a cold iceberg as you pass by. No, it doesn't mean that at all. It just means that you would not, except for a serious reason, have them in your coterie of friends.
Well, I mean, even if you were an iceberg, you could still have two hands laid on you, Your Excellency, and be blessed.
Yes.
Since we cannot know with absolute certainty whether we are in a state of sanctifying grace, how can we discern whether a difficulty in our life is meant as a warning or a chastisement from God, calling us to repentance and amendment of life, or whether it is simply a cross that we are meant to bear while continuing on our present path?
That is too general for me to answer. That's too
general.
general.
And what's interesting, you see, is it very much points to something that would be a specific case where someone has had something happen and they would like to figure that out. That would be something you'd ask your confessor, I would think, right?
Yes, it's just too general. There's so many factors in that question that I can't.
Because you would answer one way in one case and potentially another way in another case.
Yes.
As a follow-up, if the answer is that we should remain faithful to the teaching and guidance of the church, how can we know with confidence that we are truly following the church, given the confusion after Vatican II? My concern is that many people sincerely believe they are following the church and doing God's will.
Well, you compare what Vatican II is teaching to what the Catholic Church has always taught in the past. And if you do that homework, you're going to find out that what the modernists are teaching is different from what the Catholic Church teaches. And therefore, you have rupture. If you have rupture, then you must conclude that what has broken from the Catholic teaching is false, and that its leaders are false, and that you adhere to Catholic teaching. So that's very easy, actually, if you just do some homework. So what was the second part of the question?
It was just going back to people sincerely believe that they are following the church.
They sincerely believe that means they're probably in good conscience and therefore not guilty of sin. But that's something only God knows. We can only judge by objective norms.
And it's very, I think it's very generous to say someone sincerely believes when people are not, if they don't investigate Vatican II, if they're not looking into these things, if they don't care, the idea of sincere belief, it's a bit much to say
Yes.
that.
And almost 90% believe that artificial birth control is okay. 60% say that abortion should be legalized. I think 50% same-sex marriages should be legalized in the church. Trying to think. I mean, these are not people in good conscience.
Well, His Excellency always says that his memory's very bad, but when you get him to quote statistics, it's like a steel trap. It just comes out. He'll say this Pew Research poll in this year, Eucharistic belief. So if you want instant answers from His Excellency, ask him statistics. That goes back to just the facts, man.
Mm-hmm.
Robert Vach for $5. Thank you, Robert. Are there any vows, solemn or simple vows, from which not even a pope can dispense? This within the context of laicization.
The Pope can dispense from anything. All right, so no, that would not be true.
Going back to that binding and loosing business, Your Excellency.
Binding and loosing. He's the doesn't get any more powerful than the Pope, and he can dispense from anything.
About De Palma, $20. Thank you. Should non-Christian sects like the Manian Protestantism be celebrated insofar as they act as a vessel in leading someone ultimately to Catholicism? Do the ends justify the means?
No, they should not be celebrated, or they're not in any way favored. It's what we say in philosophy, per accidens. It's by accident that they might lead somebody to the Catholic faith because they might retain certain Catholic dogmas which they have stolen from the Catholic Church. So they might, just the divinity of Christ, for example.
It's interesting. There was a short that you put up the other. You didn't put it up, but it was a short about you in which you said that a non-Catholic baptism is sinful, and all the comments said this is wrong. It's valid, and you never used the word valid once. That something
it be as valid as the day is long. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So they clearly didn't listen to you. They heard what they wanted to hear, and they weren't willing to deal with something being valid but sinful. Yes. And they ignored your comment on Pius the Sixth and what he had said.
Yes.
Sede Trad for $5. Thank you, Sede. Do seminarians practice Mass before their ordination day? How are they trained to do the sacraments?
Yes, they are trained in all of the practicality of the sacraments. They baptize rubber babies, for example, in the classroom, and the priest is watching them and actually does things that typically happen at baptisms. The godmother pulling the baby away from the font when it starts to act up, and the priest wants to baptize it, And so things like that, yes.
Very famously, Father Cicada would move the baby around.
Yes, move the baby around, and oh, you poor thing. And and then for Mass, they are told to study in a book first, because we tell them put the book on one side and the missal on the other. They do their own dry Masses until they get it to a point where they can be watched. And then they have to offer a dry Mass in front of two priests or a bishop and one priest, one of them being myself, watching like hawks every single thing that they do, and with a clipboard writing down all sorts of notes as they do everything. That's how we train them for the Mass. And then they have to correct those things that we said, and then they do another one of those until they finally pass.
And I've always said, I think the dry Masses are much harder than your actual Mass, because I remember Father Eldracker, maybe a week before his ordination day, he was in the chapel in Brooksville, and you and Father Cicada were clipboarding. It was the middle of the afternoon. I happened to be walking in, and I saw it. I thought, wow, I would be pretty nervous.
That's fun.
Right, I know. But as always, all of those we watched Father Nowruz and Father Ingham practice numerous times before. It's a very important act, Your Excellency. So they're practicing to make sure they get it right.
Yes. So it's very difficult to say Mass properly.
And in a sense, Your Excellency, the church is also indicating that even in the ordination mass by having a priest assist the new priest and be side by side, and the bishop is, you could say, modeling the mass, and they're saying the words together with him. So
Yes.
there's even practice there within the ceremony.
Yes, and they're a little nervous, and also it's unusual because they're not actually saying mass at the altar; they're saying mass in the sanctuary. So that's why the assistant priest is there.
It's one of the few times you can celebrate in the Roman Rite.
Yes, it's the only time I think. Well, the consecration of a bishop, you do the same.
Right. As I say, you've done that a couple times, actually.
Yeah.
Nelson Advisors for $20. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for everything you do. Hopefully, I will make it up to Pennsylvania soon. Jimmy Hunjin, 10 pounds. Thank you, Jimmy. I still remember Father Chicato's creative titles for Bergoglio: Chaos Frank, Bergie the Crank, Papa Gaga. It is a shame that he is no longer with us to discuss Leo.
Oh, he would be great. Yes, he would have entertained all.
As Bishop Sanborn always says, he had the nerve. He had the nerve to leave us.
Yes, he did. I never forgive him.
Tom, $5. Thank you, Tom. I recently heard a sermon where His Excellency said God is more merciful to people who've sinned against morals than against faith. Could His Excellency expound on this?
Yes, in other words, more merciful upon those who sin against purity, in that sense, than to sin against the faith. Sins against the faith are very, very serious. And I've been ordained for 51 years. I have never seen anyone who had the faith but who quit the faith, denied it. I've never seen anyone who has done that return to the faith. Once they're out and gone, they are gone. And for all intents and purposes, they go to hell. Whereas, people who are burdened with sins of impurity can confess, they can listen to the priest and follow his advice and become good Catholics and lead a holy life. And that's quite common, actually. So sins against purity are sins of weakness. Sins against the faith are sins of strength. In other words, to say, I don't believe, and just throw it over. That is, it's like the Lucifer's sin. So.
I think how people are normally helped to understand this better, actually, is when you've noted that, abortion is terrible, it's this great crime, but it's much worse to deny the Trinity or to deny, article of faith. And that's, I think, once people start to understand that, because we see abortion as this great evil, but it's much more evil to
deny the faith. Say that God is a liar, essentially.
Melody Jennings, $20. Thank you, Melody. Is there an institute chapel with a cemetery, which His Excellency recommends?
Unfortunately, there isn't. We got approval for one in Brooksville, but one of the local undertakers told us it's not a good idea because you have to maintain it. And it's very expensive to maintain, and you could be open to lawsuit if you're not maintaining it properly, if they think, the grass is too high or something like that. The relatives can sue you. And so we thought this is not a good idea. So we didn't do that. And also there's an awful lot on our plate. I was running a cemetery, and all of the paperwork of a cemetery just might be too much for us.
Jason Meyer for $5. Thank you, Jason. Has His Excellency read Operation Gladio or David Wemhoof's book on John Courtney Murray? Both are necessary for understanding Vatican II.
No, but I'd be interested. I'd never heard of those. John Courtney Murray was a very leftist modernist, you might say. I mean, he was bad, and it was necessary. He was the person most responsible for religious liberty. He wrote the document. And he said the accent of the council is on the development of dogma, which means evolution of dogma. That's a quote from him. And so I would like to, I never heard of those books, so I'd like to hear more about it.
Well, and Jason, if you want to do an act of charity, feel free to send those books to His Excellency. I don't know. I know about Operation Gladio, but if there's a specific book on Operation Gladio that you want to send His Excellency, I know he will add it to his pile. He always has a lot to read, and he's always reading very interesting books. So we are in the final few minutes of our stream. I'm going to have a few more questions, and then I have some books to pitch from our bookstore, and I'm going to let His Excellency go so that he's not here for the commercials. I'm new to the sedeprivationist position. To my understanding, if the cardinals electing the Pope are embracing a false religion, Doesn't that mean they lose their own authority to elect because they embrace a heretical and false religion? You answered a variation of this earlier.
I did, yes. They are still juridically electors because they have not been declared heretics. See, so just as the Leo is juridically a pope elect because he has not been declared, so they are capable of juridical acts because of that. See, and electing a pope is a juridical act. Another argument in its favor, and which is absolutely valid, is that the church needs valid electors, and therefore the church could empower them by supply jurisdiction.
Am I correct to say the Vatican II popes are not popes with the power to teach, govern, and sanctify, but can only be called pope elects?
They are pope elects, but they are not true popes, just as a president elect is not a true president.
So we will transition to the bookstore pitch with this, Your Excellency. Is the Catena Aurea accessible and worthwhile for study by the laity?
If you have the right translation, there are some faulty translations, but yes, Catena Aurea, that was done by St. Thomas Aquinas.
So to that point, Angelo, we had advertised a Catena Aurea on the books in the Roman Catholic Media bookstore, and the translation in it said, "And the angel came in unto her and said, Hail, thou that art highly favored, the Lord is with thee." What is wrong with that, Your Excellency?
Well, it's a Protestant mistranslation of the Greek charitomene, which means in Greek, because it's the perfect tense, it's a perfect participle in Greek, it means someone who is graced totally from the beginning. See, that's the Greek. That's the original St. Luke's word. That appears in Greek literature only in one other place in all of Greek literature, charitomene. So it means that our Blessed Lady was immaculately conceived, and she had the fullness of grace from the beginning. In other words, from that the decree of the incarnation included her from all eternity. That's what that means. It's gratia plena, and St. Jerome translated it that way, full of grace. That's the meaning of that. And the Catholic dogma of the Immaculate Conception is based on that. And really, many other dogmas concerning our Blessed Lady are based on that.
So we reached out to people who had bought that recent edition, and we refunded their money, and we gave them instead the Catholic edition, which is put out by Loretto and uses the Dewey Reams translation. So anyone who has bought the Catena from us in the past, where they were notified and they were either refunded their money or we sent them a copy of the new one. So we are thankful to one of the faithful in Norway, Your Excellency, who noted that for us. That
Romario, is that Romario?
No, it was someone else.
Okay. Else. All right, it's the only person I know.
Well,
I know some other people in Norway.
Right. As the Scandinavian crew continues to grow, I will continue to pitch books while I let His Excellency go. But as always, Your Excellency, thank you so much for your time. We are, in a sense, halfway through the summer break, halfway through July, and some of the seminarians have been away. Some of them will be returning in August, but you and the fathers have continued to teach.
Yes, we are very, very desperate for priests. We even got requests tonight. So we are moving some ahead by teaching during the summer. They'll take their regular courses this year. I think one more summer of courses will do it. I'm anticipating ordaining these two at maybe the end of August of next year, like about a year from now. And if all goes well, and they're good students. And but some people thought we would be skimping on their training. We will never skimp on training. They will get everything that is coming to them, and they will do a good job.
It's just, in a sense, more difficult, Your Excellency, because it's more compressed. They've got to do more in less time.
More compressed for us. I have to teach every day, as I do the whole scholastic year. So now I have 2 hours of class almost every day.
Right. Someone is wondering whether His Excellency has to feed the cat now. That there's a regular time for that in the morning, but I think in the evening as well, right, Your Excellency?
No, it's whenever the cat wants to eat. And there's a 3 a.m. Poke. Yes, poke. And then the claws come out if I don't wake up fast enough. And I have to pour some into the bowl, even though there's plenty of food in the bowl. But he will not eat it unless I pour it in. And so that's the 3 a.m. thing.
Right.
And then pretty much the day wears on. But then there's another announcement toward the end of the day, maybe of meowing uncontrollably as if it's going to expire and just fall down, for hunger, even though he weighs 16 pounds. And that is another time when I have to pour it into the bowl. So that's, but they're sleeping now, both of them.
Well, I'm reminded of the Sad Cat Diaries, Your Excellency, where the cat says, "I'm about to die. I'm, almost going to die of hunger."
Yes. And I'm, who's cleaning out the cat box.
I know, Your Excellency. I apologize for that.
But I have a seminarian who takes it out to the garbage. I was taking it out myself. He said, "Oh, Your Excellency, I worked with cow manure and horse manure and everything. This is nothing," So.
Right. Well, I mean, they are taking these bags of dirt, Your Excellency. They might just write the word Voltaire in magic marker, as you put that in there, and then the next one, lock, whatever.
I can think of a whole bunch of them. I mean, I don't think there's more dirt bags than there is dirt. Let's put it that way.
Right. Jimmy Hunjin, 5 pounds. Did His Excellency ever hear back from the Novus Ordo quote unquote priests following the Fastigi debate?
Never a word. There were some, I think, seminarians there. He was a teacher in the Sacred Heart Seminary in Detroit. I think he's still there, as a matter of fact. And there were some seminarians, but no, there were nothing happened.
Right. Alain Duchamp for 10 Canadian dollars. And if you have a question, I'll have to save it for next time because I'm going to let His Excellency go now. Your Excellency, as always, thank you so much for your time.
Not at all. Thank you.
So as I promised His Excellency, I would not subject him to the ads for the books. I had alluded to the fact that we had the Catena Aurea for sale on Roman Catholic Media, but that particular verse from Luke is also covered in Cornelius a Lapide and the Haydock, which are both available. And just to give you some sense of how deep it goes, because people are asking, is this fit for the laity? And this is part of why His Excellency approved these for sale. If you go to St. Luke chapter 1 in a Lapide, he has 2 pages just on full of grace, why that matters. And His Excellency talked about that here. It says in Greek, kara pitomene, which Tigorina and the Protestants feebly translate as favored. Beza translates gratis delecta, freely beloved, for he thinks that the just have no inherent and intrinsic, but only an extrinsic righteousness, which consists in this, that although they be sinners, God of His own goodwill holds and reckons them as just, which is heresy. And it keeps going on. There's Hebrew words, there's Greek words. So if you really want to get deeply involved in Scripture, there are resources like this available to you, and they're on the Roman Catholic Media website in the store to buy. Same thing here. This is the Haydock translation, reading from that same text, Luke 1:28. The footnote reads, "Hail, full of grace, by the greatest share of divine graces granted to any creature." This translation, approved by the ancient fathers, agrees with the ancient Syriac and Arabic versions. There was no need, therefore, to change it into gracious with Erasmus, into freely beloved with Beza, and into highly favored with the Protestant translators. For if the 7 deacons are said to be full of the Holy Ghost, as it is again said of St. Stephen, and also of the same St. Stephen that he was full of grace, why should anyone be offended at the salutation given to the Blessed Mother of God, who would not have been raised to this highest dignity had not her soul been first prepared for it by the greatest share of divine graces? And it goes on. And as I say, these are great resources if you're interested, and make a nice gift for people. 4 more books that were just recently added with His Excellency's approval. We have the Holy Mass by Dom Granger. If you're familiar with the liturgical year, this could be seen to be a short companion, which isn't looking at particular liturgical feasts, but the structure of the Mass in general. Really beautifully bound and worth checking out. Same thing for the Roman Martyrology. This is something that you can follow along with every day. It's something that is read in Latin in the breviary, but it's also a wonderful opportunity for you to learn about saints. I learned, for example, that the woman, the well, is Saint Fotina, and she had 2 sons who also became martyrs as well. And the Roman Martyrology teaches you this sort of thing. So it's a wonderful book, hardbound with a ribbon. Also, too, the Canons and Decrees of Trent and Vatican I. There is an introduction by Charles Coulomb, maybe about 2 pages. His Excellency read it, said there was nothing wrong with the introduction, so he can recommend the text as well. So that's available. And it's not very long, I want to say, 160 pages. If you want to be more familiar with church councils, that's something that I recommend. And then a Irish correspondent to the Anti-Christian Conspiracy. If you haven't been reading Father Fahey, you're sort of missing out in life, but it's a wonderful read. The Mystical Body of Christ in the Modern World. It's not a short read. I want to say it's about 400 pages, but also in the back, you have appendices relating to the Irish question at that time and how the Irish who were working for the Republic had wrong philosophical principles. And Father Fahey is fighting that and is trying to fight for a Catholic understanding of forming the nation. But it's really wonderful, and I'm just going to read from it briefly before I will wrap up the stream for today. We can thus see that the entrance of Christianity into the world has meant 2 things. Primarily and principally, it has meant the constitution of a supernatural society, the mystical body of Christ, absolutely transcending every natural development of culture and civilization. Secondly, it has had for result that this supernatural society, the Catholic Church, began to exercise a profound influence upon culture and civilization and modified in far-reaching fashion the existing temporal or natural social order. The indirect power of the Church over temporal affairs, whenever the interests of the divine life of souls are involved, presupposes, of course, a clear distinction of nature between the ecclesiastical authority, charged with the care of divine things, and the civil authority, whose mission is concerned with purely temporal matters. In proportion as the mystical body of Christ was accepted by mankind, political and economic thought and action began to respect the jurisdiction and guidance of the Catholic Church, endowed as she is with the right of intervention in temporal affairs whenever necessary, because of her participation in the spiritual kingship of Christ. Thus, the natural or temporal common good of states came to be sought in a manner calculated to favor the development of true personality in and through the mystical body of Christ, and social life came more and more fully under the influence of the supreme end of man, the vision of God in 3 divine persons. Accordingly, Catholic social order, viewed as a whole, is not primarily the political and economic organization of society. It is primarily the supernatural social organism of the Church, and then, secondarily, the temporal or natural social order resulting from the influence of Catholic doctrine on politics and economics, and from the embodiment of that influence in social institutions. If instead of Catholic social order, we use the wider but more convenient expression of kingdom of God, we may say that the kingdom of God on earth, in its essence, is the Church, but in its integrity comprises the Church and the temporal social order, which the influence of the Church upon the world is ever striving to bring into existence. Needless to say, while the general principles of order remain always the same, social structures will present great differences at different epochs. No particular temporal social order will ever realize all that the Church is capable of giving to the world. The theology of history must include, then, primarily, the study of the foundation and development of the Church, and secondarily, the examination of the ebb and flow of the world's acceptance of the Church's supernatural mission. So I add this to what His Excellency said with the Anti-Christian Conspiracy as life-changing books. There is a before and after when you read a Father Fahey book, before and after when you read Monsignor de la Suze, and I would also add The Framework of a Christian State by Father Cahill. So it's important to read. I know there's a number of books. I just shared a mountain of them, but His Excellency always knows the importance of reading good books, and we have them after people have been asking him on live streams over and over, can we have them? And we thought, well, we should just have them in the bookstore. So go to romancatholicmedia.org, check out the bookstore. There's lots of books there that His Excellency has approved, and I think will be helpful to your spiritual life. Any more super chats? Zara on $5. Thank you, Zara. If you have a question for the next live stream, so there'll be questions and answers on the Roman Catholic Media channel, not this channel. So if you're not subscribed, make sure you do, or just subscribe to our social media. I'm going to say tentatively, I just haven't cleared it with His Excellency yet, but I'm free to just give it tentatively that it'll be the last week of July, probably that Wednesday, the 29th, but that has to be cleared with His Excellency first and is always subject to change. Is it possible that the bookstore be available outside the U.S.? The shipping costs from the U.S. I find expensive. I understand. Shield of Faith, for example, uses print on demand, so they print their books in your locality. So, for example, in Europe, I think they print in Poland, and in Australasia, they actually print in Australia. So, unfortunately, when we have the books in the warehouse, there's no other way to deal with it. We have to put the books in the mail. So I appreciate that. But one of the things that you can do sometimes when people travel is you can send the books to the friend when you know the friend is coming to visit, and get books in that way. Almost always when I'm going to France, I have friends who ask, and I have to bring books that way. All right, thank you everybody, and thank you for taking the time, if you're still here, to listen to the extended commercial read for the bookstore. But even if you don't buy from us, I would encourage you to buy these books. They'll be useful to your, not only to your spiritual life, but to a better understanding of how the church is supposed to work with society, and how it forms and changes society over time. That the religion informs culture, and culture informs politics. And so often today, people are fighting about politics, and they're missing the fact that it all comes back to our religion, and that's really what matters. Kevin, if you have a question for a future live stream, just go to the mhtseminary.org contact us page, and you can submit a question there. And you can also send a donation at that time if you'd like. All right, thank you, everybody. May God bless you, and have a good rest of the month of the Precious Blood.